Throughout the 20th century, many countries have been internationally involved, helping other countries to attain fairness as well as working towards unity within those countries. One of the countries, the United States of America, was a nation that was internationally involved during the 20th century. They played a huge role in World War II, supplying Britain with munitions and clothing, and are one of the main reasons why the Nazi obliteration of Europe and the Japanese abolition of Asia collapsed in only a slight amount of years. Although their international involvement in World War II caused peace in Europe for a certain amount of years, they have shown some bad international involvement during the 20th century. An example of this is in the Korean War, where they continued to push back the North Koreans in their territory, even though the UN's goal was to only defend South Korea. For this reason, Canada should be the UN advisor for maintaining responsible international involvement due to their good record of universal involvement. Their contributions to the Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Battle of the Atlantic, the Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the 1991 Gulf War, and Kosovo made Canada eligible and qualified to become the UN advisor for sustaining responsible international involvement. Firstly, in the Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Canadians were involved in every aspect of the battle. When the Germans captured Vimy Ridge in 1914, the British and the French tried to recapture it for over 2 years, but they were unsuccessful, and they decided to hand over the operation to the Canadians. In April 1917, the Canadians carried out a well-organized assault on Vimy Ridge led by Lieutenant General Julian Byng, and they successfully captured Vimy Ridge completely in only 3 days. This shows that they were well prepared on what to do and that they were successfully working towards peace, since they recaptured a part of France which was taken by the Germans, and they obtained more ground than any previous British ground attack throughout the entire war. Additionally, the Canadians captured Vimy Ridge without the aid of Britain or France, and it turned out to be one of the turning points of the war. This shows that they work very good independently and that they can make a lasting effect on an event that is happening on another part of the world. Even though the Battle of Vimy Ridge was probably enough proof to make Canada the UN advisor for responsible international involvement, the Battle of Atlantic was another event where Canada made big contributions. In the Battle of the Atlantic, Canadians played a big role in providing supplies to Britain. During the first 3 years of the Battle of the Atlantic, things looked bad for the Canadians, since the German submarines would attack in packs and they would destroy hundreds of convoys. However, as the battle went on, the British cracked the German naval code and Canada began to safely sail more supplies to Britain. In addition, the Canadians also learned to safely escort their supplies to Britain by building small warships called corvettes. This shows very good moral judgment when they were faced with conflict, since they knew that their convoys were not safe alone in the ocean. By 1943, the Allies believed to have won the Battle of the Atlantic, which meant it was finally better and safer to sail supplies across to Britain. Overall, the Canadian involvement in the Battle of the Atlantic helped to obliterate the German control of Europe and ultimately create peace within most of the countries in Europe, which is a good reasoning of why Canada should become the UN advisor country. Although the Battle of the Atlantic was an event that showed good Canadian moral judgment, the Korean War was another event that showed their strong moral judgment. During the Korean War, North Korea attacked South Korea, and this caused the UN to call on its members to assist South Korea. When the UN forces arrived in Korea, including thousands of Canadian soldiers, they pushed back the North Korean army back over to their border, led by American General Douglas MacArthur. This shows Canada cooperating with other countries to achieve peace in South Korea, which is important for a UN advisor country. Although the North Koreans were pushed back into their country, the US still considered pushing into North Korea itself, since it was a communist nation and the US wanted to remove communism. But Canadian Minister of External Affairs Lester Pearson obliged the UN to call a ceasefire. This was eventually called later, but this shows that the Canadians had good moral judgment, since they knew that another world war would have probably started if they attacked North Korea, since it was supported by the USSR and China. Even though people may consider the Canadians as communist lovers and they should not be put into the position of UN advisors since they call it a ceasefire, it would be better off to call a truce against North Korea and cause another world war. Altogether, the Canadian involvement in Korea shows that they are entitled to a UN advisor position. In the same way though, the Suez Crisis was another event that showed Canada's powerful moral judgment. In the Suez Crisis that happened in 1956, Egyptian President Gamal al-Nasser took over the Suez Canal, which was privately owned by British and French investors, and he threatened to ban any ship traveling to and from Israel. This caused an outrage within the French and the British, and they soon sent troops to the canal to try and regain control of it, causing a battle between Egypt. As a result, Canada stepped in, and Canadian PM Lester B. Pearson went to suggest to the UN to send a multinational peacekeeping force to the war zone between the Egyptians and the British and French to prevent fighting. The UN agreed to this, and this caused a ceasefire and a negotiation between the two sides. This shows powerful Canadian judgment because it ultimately stopped and caused peace within the two sides without Canada being involved in the battle itself, which would make Canada give good advice to other countries if they are appointed as the UN advisor country. Likewise to the Suez Crisis, the 1991 Gulf War was also a great example of Canadian international involvement. In the 1991 Gulf War, Iraqi forces under the guidance of Saddam Hussein conquered and invaded the smaller and neighboring country of Kuwait. The UN automatically had to react to this, and they sent and authorized a multinational force against the Iraqis, once again led by the United States of America. 35 countries, including Canada, were involved in this coalition of forces where Canada sent hundreds of military personnel, a squadron of CF-18 fighter jets, a supply ship, 2 destroyers, and a field hospital. Their involvement, along with the other countries' involvement, helped to defeat the Iraqis in only a month, using weapons like laser-guided bombs and cruise missiles. Even though people may argue that Canada did not contribute enough to this event, they were surely involved because of all the supplies and soldiers they provided, and they helped lead to the justice of the people of Kuwait while showing that they could still operate with the other countries as well. Overall, Canada's contributions to the Gulf War make them worthy of receiving the position of UN advisor. Similarly to the Gulf War, Kosovo was another event that shows Canadian involvement and contribution. In Kosovo in 1989, Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic abolished Kosovo as an independent province within Serbia, and only 8% of Kosovo were Serbians. This caused many battles in Serbia within the Kosovars and the Serbs. When the Serbs took most of the land in Kosovo, they displaced 300,000 Kosovars, and by 1999, they massacred an entire town where Kosovars have lived, and they still planned on eliminating the rest of the Kosovars. As a result, the nations of NATO had to respond, which included Canada, and they bombed Serbia into freeing Kosovo from Serbian harm. This shows good Canadian involvement because they helped the Kosovars obtain justice in their nation and cause peace within Kosovo and Serbia. They also worked with other countries during the bombing, which is important for a country that is put into the UN advisor position. Although some individuals may say that there were some better ways for the NATO to stop the Serbians without killing citizens, it was the quickest way for NATO to help Kosovo without the Serbians murdering more Kosovars. To conclude, Canada's contribution in the bombing of Serbia and helping Kosovo are contributions that prove that why Canada should become the UN advisor for responsible international involvement. In conclusion, Canada's involvement in many universal occurrences should make them the UN advisor for sustaining responsible international involvement. Their strong moral judgment when faced with conflict in the Suez Crisis and the Korean War, their successful work towards justice and peace in the Battle of the Atlantic and the Battle of Vimy Ridge, and their cooperation with other countries in Kosovo and the 1991 Gulf War make them qualified and suited for the UN advisor position. With all of Canada's previous involvement in international events and their good military, they would offer valuable advice to the other countries when they face occurrences around the world.